Imagine, if you will, getting picked on at school because you didn't look like or didn't sound like all the other kind of Aussie kids. Then imagine that you discover you're very good at something that those Aussie kids really value. And you get so good at it, you set multiple world records. You win more world championship, Commonwealth and Olympic gold medals than you can put in a pool room. You're a towering human. You've got hands like house bricks. You have a smile that can light any room you're in, which is good because your shoulders are so broad, everyone you speak to is permanently in shadow. You walk through the world as a powerful physical specimen, the living embodiment of Australian masculinity, and then your body turns on itself. A rare autoimmune disease with no cure starts to shred your nervous system. Your muscles start to atrophy. You have increasingly impeded mobility, and your basic physical ability begins to vanish more and more every day. How do you feel right now? Would you be enjoying this part of your life? Today, my guest is Michael Klim, and I've just asked you to imagine exactly what he's gone through. You're about to hear me ask him how he feels after everything that he's going through, and how he got to telling me his answer, which is he's actually enjoying this part of his life. How he got to that answer is nothing short of inspirational. When you were at the top of like training, what was your resting heart rate? Do you remember?
It was in the 40s, yeah. And I remember, like, that was a problem when I'd go to hospital because, like, the alarm would sound and all the nurses would start running in, and I'd be like, no, it's kind of normal.
I'm just astoundingly good at turning oxygen into...
Surprisingly, though, I just did that DNA test with all the new sort of performance traits, and the only thing, my recovery heart rate was way above normal, but my athletic ability was way below average.
Wow.
Yeah, so like a lot of traits were below average, so it was more environmental than anything.
I'd love to get into all of that. Look, we have a bit in common.
Yeah.
I was very happy to hear you pop up in a conversation with my friend Rich, who I've known for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Yet we also have something in common in that, well, I didn't actually get here from there, but we both grew up with families who came to Australia from Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
And both had to kind of go, well, I've got a weird name compared to everybody else, and my lunchbox looks very different. And
I look very different.
Yeah.
It was like, it would stand out a lot.
My cheekbones are somewhat, I remember actually in high school, my history teacher, he took one look at me and goes, what's your last name? He was Irish. I said, Ginsberg. Goes, yeah, I can tell. I don't know if that's racist. I'm not actually Jewish, but... I don't think you'd say that to Conrad Lim over there, but you're saying it to me. Oh, Conrad's not his real. Anyway, how old were you when you got here?
I was 11.
Man, all right. So like heaps of like early childhood memories and all that early programming.
Yeah, and I lived in 5 different countries before even coming to Australia. So I spent 4.5 years in India.
Whoa.
I learned to swim there. My dad was working for the Polish consulate, so we were traveling around, and I went from India back to Poland, Germany, Canada, and then eventually Australia.
What part of Poland did you grow up in?
In Gdynia, which is right at the north on the Baltic Sea, actually next to Gdańsk, where the Second World War started, the first bomb landed. So,
far out.
Yeah.
So right at the top there, because my mum's from Lithuania, which is like
stone throw,
just around the corner. Did you come to Sydney?
No, we went to Melbourne.
Melbourne,
yeah,
a little more immigrant-y.
Yeah,
than
but
Brisbane.
It was still bizarre coming from Toronto in Canada. Like you land, I mean, Toronto's spaced out, but not like Melbourne. Like I thought the end of St Kilda Road was like the end of the city, but that was just that's when suburbia started, and it was like just so much space. So I was just flabbergasted about how much space there was.
What was different about you? I mean, your dad was a diplomat. So what was different about your dad to the way that you saw, I mean, you don't know your dad's different until you see him in contrast.
Yeah.
What was the different about your dad to other dads?
I think the fact that he had seen so much and travelled so much, he always wanted, I don't know, he felt there was more for us elsewhere. And I mean, but good and bad timing. In '89, when we arrived in Australia, the wall fell down, you know? So he was a kind of a pioneer and trying to give us the best future. I don't think he's ever had regrets about not going back and letting us grow up in Poland. But I think the fact that he was always an alternative thinker. He was import-export, so he's entrepreneurial, not always doing things by the book. And
Right.
so I think he was getting a lot of scrutiny from the government while we lived in Poland as well, because he was so resourceful and was able to, get these new gigs overseas and, and he always had this kind of, and I guess maybe that's how I got my entrepreneurial kind of vein from Dad. He liked to sort of always negotiate hard and, opportunist when he had to be. And
it's got to be kind of interesting to be that guy. Because I only know from what my father told me. I went back to Prague with him 30 years to the month that he escaped. He was 24 when he left, 68 when the Russians came in. And talking with his friends and, he found a whole lot of mates to go and be able to speak with again. He hadn't seen in 30 years, right? Yeah. And just, they were, educated people. They had a, bit of get up and go about it.
Yeah.
And just how the party treated them. The Communist Party just was like, no, fucking way. And like they took one particular guy. I remember he was the editor of this big medical journal. They made him the typesetter. Yeah. You go down in the basement now, buddy. You're there for the next 30 years. Yeah. That's fucking what he did.
Yeah, you couldn't, obviously that's what communism is about. You can't stand out. I have vague memories of growing up there where, grey commission flats and, food tickets and lining up for the basics of like bread and milk and, flour and things that we really take for granted. And I remember Mum coming home from the shops one day with bruised ribs because people were, it's pretty dire. Like you forget that, we were up in arms when there was a toilet paper shortage during COVID, and Mum was like, this is like home. This is like what I was growing up in. So we didn't have toilet paper for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, but people were very quick to say, whoever made, they was like, you're a dictator. No, they're just a supply chain issue. There's a very big difference between this and what a communist is. You know, people kind of use these words, not quite really understanding what it means. Yeah. Do you remember the way sport played a role in, communism is, because that was a big thing, and you see with China now, is this is how we can show those guys.
Probably not that much in Poland because it was, we weren't obviously Poland wasn't lucrative. We didn't have the infrastructure and the facilities, but it was, for me, it was a way to, already at that age to kind of get away from a lot of the things that were happening outside of, say, sport and even at school. And I kind of always had this affinity with swimming, especially. Tennis was the other sport in our family, and that was also another opportunity that my dad was trying to make sure that we explored as much as we could. And my sister showed a lot of prowess in her tennis, and she was a national champion when she arrived here in Australia under 16 and went pro and all that. So what Dad wanted to provide for us, we ended up achieving, which was a great way to say thanks in a way, because they did sacrifice a lot. They left the family, friends, and so it was great to achieve the things for them as well.
So you learned to swim in India. When did you realise that I love this, but I love it more than everybody else? At what point did you kind of realise that you were kind of really, really into it, way more into it?
Probably not until, definitely when I arrived here in Australia. And, swimming in Canada was a very popular sport, also in Germany. I remember actually my first Olympic experience was watching Duncan Armstrong win gold in '88, and I was living in Hamburg and watching that race in German commentary, where the German was the favourite to win that race. And
West German at that point?
Yeah, it was West Germany. And, obviously, little did I know that I'll be, training with Duncan Armstrong, 10 years later. But coming to Australia, and then the first year, I wasn't a standout. The second year, neither. And probably two or 3 years later, I had this I had a better drive than other kids. I was more dedicated, and I was probably one of those annoying kids that kept on pushing the older guys and pushing the envelope a little bit. And I started winning national titles for my age group at around 13, 14.
Right.
So that was kind of the breakthrough for me.
But you don't get to national titles without, at 13, 14, you don't get there without being like, oh no, fuck yeah, I'll go and stare at a black line for 12 hours this week. Yep, I'm in.
Yeah, I think being a migrant kid, everywhere I went, I learned to be alone, and I was comfortable with that. And, you know, going in buses and going to training at 5 a.m. and, you know, traveling by myself and not necessarily relying on my parents to, I mean, they facilitated everything, but it was ultimately up to me. And I almost had this kind of mission to do things. And I see the same kind of with my son. He's now boarding at Wesley College in Melbourne, and he kind of enjoys doing things by himself, getting on a train by himself and traveling. And it was almost a bit of a challenge at that age to do it by yourself.
You feel kind of grown up.
Yeah.
You feel kind of there.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance. Well, I've spoken to a few swimmers in my time, but no one who's done what you've done. When I first got diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, I kind of like, I just kind of deflated like a bouncy castle after the cake's gone, right? And my doctor, he's just up the road here, he says, wait. Do you know how many kind of wallabies and Olympians have had sitting in that chair? Like, do you really think someone can stare at a black line for, 3 hours a day, twice a day, so that something maybe in Tokyo in 12 years could happen? Like, of course, you have to have a bit of that. When you got amongst the kind of more elite stuff, once you started winning the state stuff, I don't know, was there a lot of jumping ease on the bus? Like, was there people kind of hard to kind of focus on, like racehorses when you all get together?
It's a really interesting room, and it's kind of the dynamics in that room where, especially in Australia, it's such a small nation, and you compete against each other, and you then you represent the country together. So it's very incestuous in that sense, but I think it's a small percentage of people that get to that level in the first place. So, and every single person's got different or traits, let's say, or their habits. My kids say I've got OCD for sure. And even the way, and when I was racing or competing, it was elevated. I'd pack my bag 3 times. I'd make sure I'd have spare goggles, nearly in every pocket. I'd quadruple check my straps on my goggles and my zippers, and I'd pack extra spare suits just in case, and I think ultimately sometimes that was my undoing, because if things didn't go the way I wanted, or if I couldn't find a comfortable place where I could put my bag and I had enough space to do my certain stretches or whatever, or find my coach, it would rattle me. And it wasn't until I was comfortable in my own sort of ability and in my mindset that it didn't rattle me as much. But my first Olympic Games, just the wheels fell over because I just couldn't, it didn't go the way I planned, and I just couldn't handle it.
What changed for you? Was it ability to, you mentioned a confidence in your own ability, but I can only imagine that if you're, you say this stuff, literally just come from the cardiologist, sprinting on a treadmill, try to act, be at my peak. What changed for you when you're, trying to go to get ready to be at the most explosive your body can possibly be that you've ever done, more so than in training with the lift of the crowd and all that. But in between heats, just like the lower I can get between heats, the better the next one's going to be. Like, did you work on that as well? Yeah.
So I think all my best races, and especially that one in the relay in Sydney when I led off on the world record, is all that preparation's done. Everything is in place, and the only thing you can do is just almost like with a racehorse, you just got to open the gates and let it run, and I think the more you overthink and the more you try and follow certain cues, and you don't really even need to, and you don't even need to overemphasize effort. The effort's going to be there. You're in the race, you're in the Olympic Games, 17,000 people there. There's the common saying is that you've run the race before it's even run. So I did 150 races in one calendar year, which was no one had ever never really done up to that point. So by the time I got up on the blocks in 98 and 99, for me, that process became automatic. So I had maybe 3 or 4 cues in the race, and I didn't have to think about anything else. I didn't have to think about, my breathing pattern or my strokes or approaching the wall. Everything was just, clicking. So I think the better we can get out of our mind, so to speak, and it just comes down to intuition.
Yeah.
And you know what to do because you're probably swimming, 30, 40, 50 Ks a week. So that was the key.
All the kind of stuff I need to think about,
Yeah.
which way my little finger's got to be as it passes my hip, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can't.
That's already in there,
Yeah.
and I can't adjust it. Nothing's going to change it. The thing I can control and be aware of is regulating how much oomph I'm going to save for the end.
It's a sense of control too, because you're controlling your movement with this fatigue setting in, and your body's going. It's going to happen. It's sometimes people get a shock if it happens sooner, or if it doesn't happen if it happens later. So it's more. My coach would always talk about staying in control right up till when you touch the wall, and you can even see in races when they're close finishes the people that lose control in those last few strokes or start gasping for air, or it's all about control.
I can't imagine. I mean, you're one of the guys that you held a record for 4 years, so you know what it is to win, but you said 150 races in a year. There would have been a lot of them you didn't win. What's it like? You see how close they are. Like the length of half a fingernail. You'll lose that by. What does that do to you?
Well, that was for me. I had that, especially in Sydney. I had a roller coaster ride. I had won 2 gold medals by day 4. And 2 world records.
How do you even sleep? How do you even relax and get your shit
3,
together?
so I was rooming with him. So we had 5 gold medals by day 4 of the Olympic Games.
In your room?
In our room. And then five fluffy kangaroos as well. I actually thought we had a silver on top of that too. But for me, and then day 6 came and I had 100 fly, and I lost by less than 0.1 of a second. So if you grab a stopwatch and try and stop it as fast as you can, most people get 0.08, 0.07.
Wow.
So it's faster than your body can react. And as you said, I had the world record for a few years leading into that event. Went unbeaten for quite a few years, and to lose that specific race in front of your home crowd. Yeah, it was a tough one, and I've got a few mates and Daniel Kowalski who we talk about the ones that got away, because they're not necessarily the ones we win, because they're the ones that they're the hardest ones to swallow. And Daniel's experience in '96 with Kieran coming out of the blocks in lane 8, and Daniel being the favourite to win that one, there was a tough one for him as well. So sometimes initially I thought, what would my life look like? It would be any different. And ultimately I don't think so. And I know it wouldn't be, but it's almost that I don't know if it's self-gratitude or if it's like the ego that wants you to say, I wanted to be individual gold medalist in my home country. But, I'm so grateful to have been part of probably one of the most famous relays of all time in Australia. And I still get to talk about it every 4 years, or even not more often. But yeah, it's an interesting question, because you train for that to be Olympic champion, and that didn't happen for me.
What do you think you've learned about what it is to not get the thing you trained for, not to get the thing? Or when it happens, what can you do with that?
The hardest thing is knowing that your best would have been good enough. And, Lars, who beat me, didn't beat my world record. It was a little bit off. So that was the hardest thing. And that's where resilience comes from, And I think my whole sporting career was built on pushing my envelope, because I wasn't the biggest. I wasn't even the DNA results show that I wasn't the most physically gifted or mentally gifted either in terms of sport. So for me, I had to find resources on how to swim faster. So technology, using the suits, swimming in a different way. So I swam with straight arms. I prefer to swim underwater than on top of the water. So, I think, and train differently, for example, doing those races and traveling the world. So it was an example that I still had something to learn. And unfortunately, my career was sort of dubbed by a lot of, injuries after that, but mentally I knew that there was still other things that I could, tweak and learn from that race, which I never got to execute, but that's how I would, even in life after sport, when I was doing sales and knocking on the door of, hundreds of retailers and distributors, I took that same approach out in the pool. I had to continue to evolve and innovate and not take no for an answer.
But knowing that you can handle not getting what you wanted so badly, does that give you something you can carry with you?
I think so. I think, initially I thought, we always get compared, and now there's always people. There's all these swimming stats.
I'm comparing my shoulders with yours right now.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
And especially,
you walked in here on a cane. I'm like, how the motherfucking hell, man?
Haven't lifted a weight in years, but that's genetics. But then if we do squats, you'd have me covered. So, right. But look, I think initially I thought it'd probably make me weaker, but now looking back at where I am and how I am able to influence others through my recent journey, it's actually, if anything, it's made me tougher, because if everyone gets everything they're after, I don't know anyone that doesn't have a challenge in their life, or it's, when no one's so blessed, and even the most successful athletes in the world, I guarantee you they still want more. I mean, I know Kaylee McEwen well, and she's the best and has gone double-double, but she still is hungry for more. So, I think, it's hard to meet someone's appetite that's that driven.
Well, it's how you get to be double-double, is because everyone else has gone, you know what, I think I'm fine here.
Yeah, I'm good.
And especially as you get older and your body starts to go, dude, well, come on, this hurts.
Yeah.
And it still hurts.
And that was the story of my comeback. I physically, my body definitely wasn't responding, but mentally I was like, I want to do this. I still want to go around the block again and be part of this amazing group of people and be part of this team that, we had such a great era. But it's when that physical and mental don't match, it's a tough one. And that's when you start, I did anyway, I started resenting a lot, the sport. I started being grumpy. I started really being angry with myself that, why can't I line up these two things, and why can't I swim again the way I did before?
What changed for you?
Well, there's age. There was definitely, swimming in your early 30s is much different to swimming when one sole focus is just swimming. And the second time around, I had a family. I was running a business. I ended up going actually to the same level as I did when I retired. I didn't take into account that the rest of the world was also going to progress. And we had the likes of James Magnuson, Cameron McAvoy, they all came on the scene, Eamon Sullivan, sorry. So I didn't evolve as much as they did. So, but it also proved that you can manage, and it's probably healthier to have other things in your life. When I was a pro, it was literally everyone was working for me almost. You have all these resources feeding into, and it's a very selfish existence. And by the second time around, the pressure wasn't there. I was kind of, okay, I could come home, and the kids didn't care. They were toddlers. They didn't care if I won or lost, even though they were saying, go win, daddy. But it put a kind of a normal spin on things rather than, for me, I used to beat myself up a lot if I didn't get the result I wanted.
Resentment is tough. Certainly face it in my career. I face it right now. I'm 50. I'm trying to figure out what the fuck to do as my industry changes very rapidly. And I turn around and I see he's not Magnuson, but I see some those kids, they're like, what are they, 22? They grunt for like an hour? 400,000 people follow them. Fucking hell. What happened?
Yeah, what do I have to say?
What did I do wrong? And I was talking to my wife about this last night. It's like, I just don't even, there's resentment there. And I know that's really bad for me to have, because it's not productive whatsoever. And it's going to end everything if I'm not careful, because exactly what happens to you. You get cranky. You start to be a bit of a punish. And then nobody wants to be around. And you're like, see, I told you they don't want, and then you kind of make it true.
Yeah. I mean, for me, in terms of my personality really changing was when, when I got diagnosed, and I was really kind of playing. I played that victim card so well. I was angry with the world.
Yeah.
Why was I dealt this card? I was resentful with everyone around me. You know, I felt that I was hard done by, and so that was kind of the emotions that I had. You know, when I first retired towards the sport, I had those emotions towards everyone else and towards me as well. Like, did I do something wrong to deserve this? And that what kind of got me into a pretty dark place after a couple of years.
So we're talking about the chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. I should know this because I heard about it. My father was a rheumatologist, so he was all about autoimmune disease.
Right.
But autoimmunes, I mean, I grew up with a guy that treated this stuff, right? Autoimmune stuff is so, I don't want to say cruel, but it kind of is, because it's just a gene that turns on.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And often they're not caused by anything.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Yeah.
And then fucking that's it.
Yeah.
What happens now?
Yeah.
And most of it, what my dad's work was, most of it was managing quality of life, because he couldn't take it away. He couldn't make it.
That's right.
And quality of life involved as well. Well, these meds will make it better, but these meds will also turn your stomach into a piece of toilet paper. So we're going to need to have these meds, or you're going to have to think about how you manage this. And as someone who, you're in the tiniest percentile of what humans can do with their bodies, right? To know, I know what it feels like to be strong. I know what it feels like I can run fucking 30 Ks if I want.
Yeah.
Back when I was running, I know what it feels like to pull a deadlift. I know I feel strong. I feel powerful. To have that, be told that like it's probably not going to be there all the time.
Yeah.
It's going to eventually one day going to go away.
Yeah.
Would have been so hard.
Yeah. The harder thing was experiencing it and seeing it kind of disappearing in front of my own eyes, not only in the mirror, but if I'd be sitting down or walking, my calves were just fading away, and I would notice in photos visibly that my like from the knees down, I don't really have any calves left except a little bit on my left side. So I was rehabbing a bad ankle on the left side, and I one day just couldn't do a calf raise on the right side, and that was kind of the start of it. And so it was just being stripped away of this kind of slowly the things that I was renowned for, my physique and my ability to even post-swimming career. I want to do an adventure race, sure, I'll do it. Ride 3 hours, I'd run a few marathons and I could do anything. And then I couldn't get up one flight of stairs after 6 months, and then I couldn't get to the water cooler and I'd fall over. And so because it came so quickly, I wasn't equipped for it. I wasn't ready for it. I was drowning my emotions with the wrong stuff. I was secluded myself from the rest of the world, used COVID as an excuse. And I kind of just fell into, used all the pattern that wouldn't set me up for longevity in this condition. So, there had to come a time where actually it wasn't up to the people in my life, my partner who was amazing, Michelle, and my parents and my sister to be that support network. It was up to me to get out of that. And ultimately, that the moment I dropped that ego and I realized that, people respect me or people like me for my personality or whatever, or they don't like me because I've got big lats or delts. It was like it was almost that shallow and that vain, that mentality. It was just bizarre.
But it's understandable, Michael, considering, if I recall, like some of the marketing stuff you were involved in around the time, fuck, I would have got my rig out every second of the day if I looked like that. Like, take all the photos you want, I would do that all. And it's understandable that if you've got that much focus on you and that many people want to throw money at you to hold things, like, it's because of this. And having that association, it makes sense, and I'm not a bad person for feeling that, but you have, like I said, you don't have an awareness that it won't always be there.
Yeah. And I had to, because I think over those couple first years of the disorder, I sort of as you said, my awareness was terrible. Even in my relationship with my partner, even as a parent, and work-wise, my productivity was shocking. And so the moment I just shifted in terms of more action, where I started going back into the tools that I knew from sport, from routine to exercise to mindfulness to all the things that I really enjoyed, and actually doing the work in terms of counselling and, diving deeper and addressing the issues that, if it's ego or if it's kind of my self-worth and my identity. Once I bridged all those gaps, I was kind of almost like I was released. It was bizarre. And say my neural studies that I'm doing every 6 months, they've maybe improved, a few degrees here and there, but my output in terms of a person and my outlook on life, it's bizarre. I'd say 180 degrees increase. So it's so physical disability for me has not been the restricting part. It was more just, how mentally I viewed myself, and then how mentally I restricted myself about what I could do.
I had to get a hip replacement. All right, not all surgery is low risk.
Yeah.
No surgery is no risk.
Yeah.
And there was a complication. So I ended up with 18 months of unbelievable chronic intense pain, which took 2 more surgeries to sort out. What kind of pressure does being in that headspace put on the relationship?
Well, I think I'm so lucky that I found Michelle. She's a amazing human. I met her in 2019, just at the beginning of all these kind of symptoms. And so the fact that she stayed with me, I say to her that she got the dud version of Michael Klim without the rig. But, I think it was hard because everything would trigger me. And she was the person that was there 24/7. So she would, a lot of the time be the recipient of bad behavior. And she was protecting me from the kids, and when I was in a bad mood, so they would be okay. And, she suffered carer's fatigue, and it's something very common. And, I've really come leaps and bounds in terms of my progression in the last 2 years, but, it's very common that, sometimes the carers give so much that sometimes I get left behind because I had my counsellor, I had the great support network that I built, and I had new projects that I've instigated and had places to go and people to talk to. And sometimes when, like in Michelle's case, she literally stopped her life, prioritized my well-being for everything that she did, moved to Bali, forgot about her career. And so she also had to rebuild and, put pieces back together. So it takes a special person to endure that. And I'm lucky that I'm still with Michelle 5 years on. COVID, CRDP. She also came into a dynamic with, I've got three kids. She became an instant stepmother living in a foreign country. So she's superhuman.
Step parenting's a whole other. That was my first experience of parenting was step parenting. She was 10 when I met Audrey.
Yeah, and
it's a whole other kettle of fish, man. It's a whole other thing.
How do you find being a stepdad?
An enormous responsibility and an incredible gift.
Yeah,
I could not. And I say it often is that I'd seen my mates change when they had kids, and she was my girlfriend's kid. We were dancing around the living room. It was fun.
Yeah.
And then one day I woke up, it was like, I would push you out of the way of a train if it meant that I would die, but if you stayed alive, I would, and every dollar I earn is now to make all your dreams come true. And I was like, what? I'm a fucking self-centered, egotistical asshole. How did that happen? And it was just, that was it. And I was done. I moved back from America, and I was nothing else. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
And I was very happy to know that even without not a biological child, could happen. Like it's still, you know, I'm still, you know, who are you and why can't I sleep in the bed every night with mum? Like it's, you know, that was still there, which is tricky. But
how are you going with, like, let's say, putting those boundaries in terms of, you know, because I know it's that dynamic is hard for, you know, three kids, one kid, you know.
Well, yeah, I spoke to a lot of, I had an interesting focus group because I was working on Bachelor at the time.
Yeah.
And it kind of got out that I had, you know, a stepdaughter. And early on, one of the ladies, it was like early on, there's like 20 of them. And I said, you got a stepdaughter, don't you? I said, yeah. And one of them went, stick with it.
Yeah.
And there were like 3 or 4 of the other ones nodded and went, yeah. Mid-20s or so. Just hold on. I was like, and that really helped me.
Yeah.
And there was another mate of mine told me something that was really, really, really good. Because his stepdad showed up when he was about the same age.
Yeah.
And he said, I was so little, I didn't understand that if I liked him, in my mind, if I liked him, it meant I didn't like my own dad. So I couldn't like him.
Yeah.
And when Benny told me that, I was like, right.
Yeah.
But those, like, it's still, you know, still hard because you've never loved someone so much that sometimes doesn't want anything to do with you.
Yeah.
Which is kind of hard.
Yeah, and look, the thing
and that's fine because they're a teenager and they're trying to become an adult, and that's part of it.
And it's not even like it's because you're a stepdad.
No,
it's where they are in their life, and you know, obviously, you know, I've had 3 kids, and I've been trained to sort of acknowledge what I need to take care of, what I sort of let through to the keeper, what sort of triggers me, what needs disciplining. But I think, you know, if you're new into the game, you take everything to heart.
I sure did, man.
And it's and it's sometimes Michelle goes, how come it doesn't bother you? Are you not going to do anything about that? I'm like, I just pick the battles, and sometimes it's, you know, and then she would sit with things that, you know, make them stew and potentially get worse, and so that but we found a really good balance where you know, I can be the authoritarian, and now as we speak they're at Bondi Junction having a great old time. So it actually is the best feeling seeing, you know, my kids having the best time with my partner. It's the best. That's
really, really lovely. I mean, we got really lucky. We had help. There was a children's hospital near where we live, and there was someone there, and they had you know, this is for people who are blended families, and exactly what we were. Great.
Yeah.
Teaching guys like me how to, because I had, you know, 1 month of parenting experience, and by this point, when I moved in, she's 11.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I just do not want to fuck this up as much, like, because it's really
interesting time too.
Well, it is. It is such an important time in their life, and it's. My buddy Steve told me, they're going to ignore you, but your job is to be there for them to ignore.
Yeah.
That's and the way I kind of put it is that when they're really little and they're in bed and they're between you, it's quite cute. But as they get bigger, it feels like they're fucking kicking you in the spleen. They're not. They're just checking to making sure you're there.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing with their feet.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that, you know. I'm going to do this thing to see if you're at the edges to help me.
And look,
it's hard.
This CIDP has been the best thing for me to reconnect the family. Yeah. I've gone through a divorce, and now, you know, I've got an amazing partner, but if, you know, unfortunately it did take this condition for us to get so tight, but I put all eggs in one basket for the kids, and you're trying to, you know, provide for them, and putting, you know, I've learned to prioritize much better. I used to go to opening of everything, you know, I'd try and be seen, make the most of my profile. Now it's obviously the book is coming out, but I'm much better at saying no and putting the kids first. So
You really struck me, even when I saw you, you know, walk in here, you struck me as someone, like, there's a levity about you. There's a lightness about you, which with someone dealing with what you're dealing with and all the things you're describing, it's evidence of the work that you've done to get here. But I can only imagine that you're there because acceptance has had to be some of the work you've had to do.
Yeah.
What would you say about acceptance?
It was a topic that, you know, my counsellor brought up, because I was very top level when I was seeing her for many sessions. And one day she just said, "Stop giving speeches to me." Like, you're just giving a speech after speech. And, it's kind of almost, So, and we started talking about the acceptance, or more actually grief. It was it was just a form of grief. And that was the way I was expressing myself, acting out, being deceitful, lying, certain things. And it was all grief and, not wanting to address these emotions. And actually going public with my condition and seeing how much love and support, and there was this influx of just other sufferers wanting help and wanting to share their story. But at that time I was already prepared for that, but it was more that my inner circle just became so big, and then everyone out there just were in praise for me to having the guts to actually talk about it. And that just gave me so much more sort of, I guess, empowerment to push on. Yeah. So, I think it was more grief than acceptance. I'm still pushing the envelope in terms of physically what I can do. I just went skiing for the first time on the weekend. And, I hadn't skied in years, and like my left side was really good. My right was dodgy. So I had to sort of, figure out a way to ski where I can favor my left leg. So I'm still, I think that's where I always try and push the envelope and find, even new treatment methods. And I'm trying hyperbaric chamber at the moment, a 60-session course to see if that's going to, have any different result. Or so I think that part of me won't change. But I think in terms of, I've accepted that there is a new norm. Maybe.
Yeah. I once asked my dad how he talks to people about this stuff, and he said, well, I make him a cup of tea, because he would come out sometimes. I would do reception for him on the weekends. He'd come out sometimes, make a cup of tea. Want to make it? No, I got it. And walk back in with a cup of tea and say, these things happen. They're nobody's fault. The sooner you get on with the sooner you accept that it's happening, the sooner that we can get on, finding a way for you to live the life in the way you want to live it, the best way you possibly can. And that's the only way forward. Like, it took me a really long time to heed his advice. And like all good doctors, he didn't heed his own advice. But
your dad's one of a few, because the experiences that I've had, doctors didn't prepare me for what was happening. I mean, the closest I got was, I think, my doctor said, this is going to be the greatest challenge of your life and you have to be ready for it. And I'm like, well, I'm not, because I don't even know what the challenge is.
Yeah, wow.
So there was another motivation for me to start the foundation and give patients a little bit of guidance, because everything is self-explanatory, and you become Dr. Google, and your own.
Which can be good and bad.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think that bedside manner, that is amazing.
It's kind of old. Both my parents were doctors. It's kind of old school. That kind of thing. It's the patient needs to be enrolled in their own bed. Yeah. Getting better, as you mentioned. It was only once you decided that things started to change. What did you notice about the things that you could do when you started putting those things together? There's a day where I did do this, and then there's 2 days where I did do this, and there's 3 days where I did do this. Once you started having a bit of agency, how did that make you feel?
Well, it all coincided with a few things. I gave up the grog initially because I was drinking too much. I was drinking unhealthy amounts to forget my emotions and not wanting to deal with the new situation.
You come to the right place to talk about that,
Rob. Yeah, that's right. I know, mate. I know.
14 and a half years, bro. Like, the only thing that happens...
2.5 years.
The only thing that happens is the only thing that happens is the dosage that you need to get the same effect gets to the point where it's going to kill you.
Yeah.
The problems they just get worse.
Don't go away. Exactly.
You're going to have to deal with it eventually.
That was the first thing that, obviously collectively we decided I will give that away. I became more diligent with routine and exercise, and there was it's amazing how this momentum built so much. Like, it's, as soon as my head became clearer, I became more productive, and then I could do, I could talk to people more often. I was you know, I could hold this kind of, there's no way I could hold this conversation. I wasn't, my partner, Michelle, said, you know, she's seen me talk in public quite often, and I was doing interviews, and prior to me, let's say even giving up drinking or being in this kind of depressive state, she said, you couldn't string a sentence together. And it was, now it's bizarre that not that I always get off on it, but I really get into conversations. I can be present with you for however long, and I remember talking to people, but actually not being there, not being present, you know, and that was, so these things just snowballed, and I got a little bit of being the ambassador for Lifeblood gave me a little bit more sort of responsibility, and then I started the swim school with Michelle and my sister in Bali, and you know the responsibilities grew, and this is a figure of speech, but I was walking and then I was running and then I was sprinting in life, and now it's all happening.
You know, hearing the giggle come out of you, because I know what it's like to have forgotten the last time you had a giggle. I remember a point, it was years. I don't remember what it felt like to chuckle. I know I can do it. I've done it before, but there's nothing that's happened in the last how many weeks, months, or whatever that's made me feel like doing it spontaneously. So that's a huge, I can understand. I really appreciate how much work it's taken. What would you say to people who might be on the other side, what you were describing before, when everyone's kind of looking at you going, we've done everything, it's going to have to be you? What would you say to people who might be in that space, or someone who loves someone who's in that space?
Look, I was fortunate enough that I could gravitate to things that I still enjoyed. So I gravitated back to exercise a bit more, gravitated to a little bit of creative stuff and painting, and during COVID, so I drew a little bit more. So I started doing mindfulness things that didn't feel like mindfulness in a sense. So I think, and it was step by step. There's a few things that I went really hammered down. So, you know, carnivore diet and no grog and, you know, ice baths. There was a few things that I went really hard on, but then other things in terms of self-exploration and development, that kind of took its time. And it was, I'd say it's, you know, the saying, one day at a time. So it was one day, and it's amazing the momentum you build from day to day. You know, like you make, and I don't even look at it as sacrifice anymore, because it never was a sacrifice. People talk to me about sport being a sacrifice. It wasn't. It was my choice. I wanted to be in that pool at 5 a.m. And unfortunately for me, I'd say I wish I adopted this thinking sooner, because, you know, I'd probably, even prior to my diagnosis, because I know that I'd prioritize work, or I'd prioritize, you know, being on my stupid phone instead of being present with my kids in the living room, you know. So it's not necessarily about, you know, the last few years, but it's, I think one thing at a time that, you know, even just as simple as being present. That's kind of one of the most rewarding things for me, to even, you know, having a drive from Sydney to Thredbo with the kids without having a fight. It was a big win.
Man, I don't think I've ever done that in a car by myself. That's 6 hours of me not shouting at myself or doing something dumb. Wow. But I know. Look, I know what you're saying. It's the momentum is surprising. I mean, you probably didn't think that by the time you were automatic in the pool that's the result of the momentum, but it was the result of deliberately choosing every single day to do these particular things, and your body just going, okay, to the point where you'd done it so many, as you mentioned, you weren't genetically different more than anybody else. You were just the guy that has done it more than everybody else, to the point where no one could, there was daylight between, you know, you and the next person. And so similarly, it's like, it's funny that you're surprised by the momentum on this side when you've already done it. You know it works. But it's interesting how we kind of take convincing, isn't it? Yeah,
and it's before it was all about taking.
Oh, really?
It was taking everything, you know, like, and now it's all about giving. It's a different, I think that, you know, from the swim schools is passing on knowledge, you know, let's say with Lifeblood is, you know, sharing awareness and spreading a good message, and same with the foundation. So I think it's selfless more, even though obviously you know, there's times where I do need time for myself, or prioritize myself. But overall, it's my mindset is, more service rather than taking.
Man, once I learned to ask people, what can I do for you? Mate, my career went nuts. I felt better. It's I always tell people, it's like, however I can help you, don't ever hesitate. Like, it's never a problem.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's one of those things that we forget is the thing that's going to bring us lasting happiness. We think a big TV is going to bring us lasting happiness. Yeah. It's not.
Although it's good sometimes.
It's pretty good sometimes, but then sometimes
when
nothing.
You're on it, it's not bad. It's
sometimes, but sometimes nothing's on. You sit there going like, oh, this is bullshit. It's like I've got every program ever made in history, and I don't want to be on my couch.
I saw the best sketch about mindfulness in the 80s. Rewinding a VHS was mindfulness. Waiting for the bus was mindfulness. Watching condensation on the window was mindfulness. So,
but it's true though. It is, and it's interesting that you mentioned. I laughed earlier when you said being on my stupid phone rather than being in the living room with my kids, because like that does happen to me. It's interesting you say that, because as a community, we've kind of deprived ourselves of the skill of just waiting.
Yeah,
we never wait.
Yeah,
we rarely wait.
Yeah,
and I think it's really important. We need to have that moment of just sitting.
Yeah,
to make everything else feel okay.
Yeah.
How do you talk to your kids about what's going on with you, and what things like the next 20 years look like? By the time, the youngest is still
13.
Like so. By the time you're they're kind of leaving uni and stuff like that, or by the time they're getting married, like what is it?
Yeah, you know what I've learned over the last few years that I'm trying not to project that far forward, because I don't know what it's gonna hold for me. And I mean, I'm hopeful that there will be some great medical developments, and hopefully I'm part of that, and I can. But exposing the kids to the reality of my condition was a tricky part, because we didn't know what was going on, and we didn't know where I was. There was 30% chance I might end up in a wheelchair, 30% chance I could be as I am now, pretty sort of stable, or 30% chance I could get better. So, but I couldn't give him an answer. And in all honesty, I didn't give him enough credit. I didn't think that they would be able to handle the information, but they surprised me with their maturity and their awareness. When you want them to be aware, they're not. But when you didn't really want them to be, they're so great. The intuition, especially the youngest, her intuition when it comes to an awareness when it comes to my health and my well-being, she can read my face like it's unbelievable. So I think where they've gone from being, kids can be self-centered, as you know, but then now when we're going out in public, it's led by Michelle, but knowing, either to advise me of a step or, letting me hold on to their neck for balance, or just simple things that now I have to always keep in mind. They are all part of it now. I probably abuse it a little bit when I need them to fetch me a glass of water occasionally, but that's part of it.
I'll let you have that. I'll let you have that. You're a very, you're a recognisable person. Yeah. What's it like when people see you when you're out and about?
It's amazing because people obviously talk about the relay and the swimming stuff, but now people are talking to me about my resilience and what I'm doing, in terms of blood donors, and people come up to me on the street and say, "I donated yesterday. I donated for you yesterday," and it's kind of cool. It's like obviously. Without the swimming, I wouldn't be here. But it's great that I can resonate with the public in a different form. So, and I've managed to keep this bald head in the limelight for the right reasons, and hopefully I can, still make a difference in a different way.
What did you think masculinity was when you were at your athletic peak, and looking at through the lens you've got now? What do you think masculinity is? What does it mean to you now?
Good question. I think obviously for me, masculinity was, was physical, was kind of protection, was almost authoritarian. It was a little bit of, I wasn't saying imposing, but you have an aura of this masculinity. And I didn't really let myself be emotional when I was a kid. I'm very similar to my son, who gets quiet and withdrawn, and that's how I was introverted. So I don't know where it went, but it went in somehow, and I just, I wouldn't communicate much even with my immediate family. But this macho kind of existence, that was what I thought it was. But now it's really, the more I share my experience, the more I'm vulnerable with what I experienced, the more people give me credit and show me, respect for being a male that's able to talk about, not being physically able, or not being, the fact that I'm being able to talk about my, a period where I had depression, and a period where I wasn't a great dad or a great partner, and those times existed, and I can, put up my hand and, accept that was a course of my life. But I'm in a position now where I'm, clear enough mentally and physically, or not physically, but to address those, and I wouldn't say necessarily make amends, but to be the best dad, partner, friend that I can be. And that's, for me, is, I think, comes with being transparent and vulnerable.
And there's certainly, by the sounds of things, no less of a provider, no less of a protector,
no.
And certainly no less powerful. Would you say less or more powerful now?
Probably more. Like, if even people that probably weren't born when I was swimming, talking to me about a topic that is so far removed from the swimming pool, and it's purely on adversity and overcoming life's challenges, which we all have, depending, all different shapes or forms. So even though it's not perfect, but I'm enjoying this part of my life, it's kind of like hearing myself say it. It's a little bit weird as well, because I only got diagnosed 5 years ago, and I still can't walk properly. I still got the cane hanging on the chair, but it's almost, I'm enjoying seeing what the next 10 years brings, and we'll see where we end up.
There's not many men that could have said that sentence, man, considering what you're facing, and it's extraordinary, mate.
Thanks.
I'm so glad you wrote this book. I'm so glad you came to chat. You've got a lot to give, buddy.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you so much,
man.
Michael.
It was a
I
pleasure.
really appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.